very exciting.
See if anybody's there.
Maybe I will be known.
Oh yeah, people are coming in.
Actually, I want to.
So just to let everybody know, those of you who are joining now, we will start this in one more minute, but I wanted to let you all in because it takes a few minutes for everybody to get on. And welcome. And in case anybody's curious, my background is going to the Sun Road in Glacier National Park because people always ask me where it's from. And I was there last summer and fell in love back when you could travel.
Is it a poster behind you or is it like some kind of program?
No, I fell so much in love with Glacier National Park that I donated to the Parks Conservancy there. And when all of the craziness started, they sent out Zoom virtual backgrounds for anybody, any donors who wanted to use them.
Nice.
And I said, well, works for
Very
me.
cool.
Yeah, so that's where I am or wanna be.
You know, I was just thinking, I don't know how likely this is in my day-to-day life, but sometimes when people call me, it pops up on my iPad. Is there a way to make it so that a call is blocked?
Just invite him to be part of this conversation.
I can do that. I just don't want my screen to get taken over by, like, I don't know, some random person giving me a call.
You know, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to sort of mute that. And there probably is, but
yeah, I don't get called that often, so I think we're going to be good.
Well, I think we're up to 43 and the numbers are growing. I just want to give people a few more minutes to join in before we really begin the program. And thanks to all of you who are already on board.
Mm-hmm.
So Katie, while we're waiting another minute or two, how are the fall colors back there?
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's so beautiful. I mean, you can see the light in the trees up there. I don't have too many extremely colorful trees here, but
oh, that's nice.
It is a wonderful place to be. That's for sure. I'm practicing my slow camera movements. I'm going to be awkwardly slow as I tour the studio. So just everyone be prepared for that.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and start. Welcome to everybody who's on, and can't welcome those who aren't here yet. But so this is NBO's third NBO Presents program, and it is a studio tour with Katie Grove, our artist, and Nick DeFord, who is an NBO board member and a program director at Arima. I just want to let you know that all donations are welcome. We're doing this program, NBO Presents, with no funding except for whatever NBO has. And so far, we are very proud of how the programs are working, and we're glad you all signed up for this one. I will put a donation link in the Q&A section, and please feel free to support us that way, and also put your questions in. The chat is disabled so we don't distract from the program itself. And Nick will also be monitoring the Q&A, and we'll really delve into your questions later on in the program. If the link I put for donations doesn't work for some reason, you can go to nationalbaskettree.org and hit the donate tab and scroll down, and there's a way to donate there. Also, I'll say this at the end as well. On November 4th, NBO Presents is moving to the Sakwa Textile Talk, and Sakwa is a Studio Art Quilt Associates. And in case I forgot to mention, my name is Pam Morton, and I am the Executive Director at NBO. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to mute and hide myself, and I hope you enjoy this studio tour. I got to see some images, and Katie took Nick and I on a tour for our practice session, and it's really spectacular. So enjoy yourselves.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Pam. So my name is Nick DeFord, and I am going to be, I suppose, the host of today's studio tour. And a little bit about me. I, as Pam mentioned, am the program director at Aramont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I have full disclosure, I am not primarily a basketry maker myself, although I am a great basket appreciator and teach it occasionally, which is a wonderful thing that I love to do is teach the methods. A couple quick things. Again, I want to thank Pam for inviting me to join this discussion today. Thank Carol Eckert, president of the board, as well as thank 50 attendees and more, I think, to come as people come in. Thank you for joining us on this either mid-afternoon or late afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. But I want to just start by introducing really why we're here, our guest today, Katie Grove. Katie is an artist and educator whose passion is to guide people in connecting to the creative self through the combination of art and nature. In her basketry classes, she creates an environment where individuals can explore self-expression while learning how to identify, use, and appreciate local plants. Katie has a BFA in printmaking from SUNY New Paltz and a background in fiber arts. She's based in Stone Ridge, New York, and teaches basketry workshops throughout the East Coast and exhibits her art regionally. I first came across Katie's work probably around 2016. Immediately fell in love with Katie's use of random weave and natural materials, things that, of course, I really appreciate and love to teach as well, and asked her to teach a class at Aramont in 2017. So, you know, being based in Tennessee, for just like many of you, this is the first time I really get to see and take a tour of Katie's studio. And it's really great during a time like this when we're doing so much from home to be able to have this experience. I think everybody's probably going to be really excited to see your workspace, Katie, and to be a part of that. So my last thanks is, of course, to you, Katie, for inviting us into your space. One quick final note before I turn it over to Katie. I just want to say that, again, as Pam mentioned, there's a Q&A box. If anybody has questions while they're watching, please feel free to jump in, use the Q&A. Don't feel like you're going to be interrupting Katie as she takes us on a tour of her studio. We can accumulate those questions. If it's something topical to what she's talking about, I can sort of interrupt. I'll sort of moderate those questions. What's great about these Zoom webinars is that you don't have to wait till the end to ask your question. If you think of something, if you want to respond to or have a question about something that Katie's talking about, just jump in there and ask it on that Q&A. So without further ado, please help me welcome Katie. Katie, tell us more about your work and your studio.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. It's really exciting to be here, you know, alone at my house I've got my cat sleeping next to me, and yet be connected to so many people all over the country. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and get to know a little bit more about what I do. And I actually can feel the sun. The sun is like setting behind me, so maybe I'll turn a little bit so I don't get eclipsed by the sun. So like Nick said, I'm an artist and an educator. I make all sorts of different kinds of art. It's typically nature inspired, a lot of basketry, a lot of woven sculptures. I make paintings. I love just being inspired by what's around me in the natural world and then responding to that. And then the second part of my existence, I suppose you could say, is teaching basket classes. So that's how I make my living, and I'll be showing you a lot of the materials and talking about my classes as we move inside. But I wanted to start out here because it's, the heart of what I do is my beautiful surroundings, and I often travel. When I travel, I'll gather materials. So there's experiences in the natural world that are coming in from all over the place, really. And I also wanted to start out here because this is my studio. Right now I'm sitting at a picnic table. I'll turn and look at all my surroundings in a moment, but I find myself out here, especially in the fall and the spring when the weather is really nice, doing a lot of my work. And then I'll be inside the studio the rest of the year working, just wherever I am, making baskets and gathering materials. I'm going to I'll sit here and talk for a little bit. We'll do the move inside. I'll talk in there a little bit more. But I wanted to start with just some things that I usually get asked when I'm talking about my background and how I became a basket maker. And it really, I honestly feel like I was born to do it. I do recall being a child and being outside tying leaves together and trying to weave things, and never really like actually making anything woven with my outdoor explorations. But I look back and I just see that seed of like it was meant to be. And then as I studied fiber art and came to be introduced to basketry, it just was a perfect path of my love of being outdoors, making things with my hands and being creative, and then getting to share it with people through classes. Let's see, I suppose I can note that I've been doing classes since maybe 2012, and the past, I would say, 4 years, it's been my work, starting in March through December, and then take the winter off to focus on traveling or just making in general and having a little bit of time to myself. Some of the stuff that I have out here, I'm going to do the flip. So you just let me know if I'm going too too quickly with my tour. So out here, I typically work on sculptural things when I'm outdoors. My recent focus has been taking these found objects, logs, pieces of bark, come a little closer, basketry materials as well, elm inner bark or black ash splints, and seeing if I can just how I can combine the materials into these sculptural forms in interesting ways. I'm interested in like what if the log was growing into a basket. This, I don't know if I can capture this whole piece, and just give me like a thumbs down or something, Nick, if I'm going too quickly. But this recent series of work is taking black ash logs, which is, for any of you that have worked with it, an amazingly beautiful material, a really special traditional material, a material that's in danger, of course. The emerald ash borer is a pest that is really decimating the ash tree populations on the East Coast and all over the country. And the days when black ash is available to be used for baskets they may dwindle. There's a lot of efforts right now to be protecting and saving seeds of the black ash, and I highly recommend everyone look into those. But I was lucky to be gifted a log last year and have been experimenting with making, of course, splints with the material from the log, and then in this tall piece that I've been focusing on, splitting out sections of it and then weaving pieces of the splint from that log into the piece as if it grew from it. Very excited about this body of work. This is actually what I did earlier today, was go pick up this amazing hollow log from a place that I was teaching a workshop last week. They had this pile of firewood, and I saw these giant logs and I was like, oh my gosh, can I have one? And they said yes. So I went and picked it up today. And this is going to be my next woven sculpture. I'm going to have like a bowl shape of woven ash inside the log. How that's going to work, I have no idea. It's always an experiment to see how to make these things possible. I have the vision and the dream, I've got the materials, and then technically making it happen is the fun challenge. So that's the type of work I do out here. I'll give you a little roundabout of the space. I've been in this location for 2 years. I like to say that I bought a garage, comes with a house, because it was all about this gigantic garage studio space when I moved in. I came from a tiny house, like a small cottage where the walls were lined with all my basket materials, and studio was the kitchen table and the bedroom. So to get to move into this, for me, quite large studio space has been an absolutely amazing step forward in both my teaching career, because I can have students here, I can teach classes, and also in just being able to do work. I have to introduce my my cat Bo, because he's the basket class ambassador. As soon as anyone arrives for a class, he comes and greets them right away. All right. So I think I'm going to move inside now. That sounds good? See?
That's great, Katie.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So this is my studio. I did clean it up a lot for you all, so sometimes it's just a little bit messier. It's a large finished garage. Did a lot of work to make it nice in here, so it could be a good place to both teach and do my work. Put my stuff down. All right. So this is where I keep all my supplies. My year is pretty seasonal, as I mentioned before, not only with when I'm working, when I'm teaching, when I'm traveling, but also when I'm harvesting materials. All of the stuff that I use in my classes is material that I've harvested from the wild for the most part. I will purchase willow and pine needles on occasion, but for the most part, it's all stuff that I harvest throughout the year. So my year's broken up into, in the early spring, I'll harvest all my pine bark. And then in the later spring, it's bark season. So I'm looking for trees to harvest inner bark from. Winter, I'm looking for vines. It's a wonderful seasonality. I'm never bored because there's always something out there to harvest. I do harvest some things from my land, but in reality, the whole world is my garden. I have a lot of relationships with local landowners that will have me come to their property and look around and see what material there is to harvest. Maybe they have a really good cattail patch or vines overtaking everything. And I'll come back every year to the same spots and get to see the people there and harvest the materials that I am getting used to every single year. It's a wonderful way to be in relationship with the community and to break away even more from the model of the artist in her studio alone making things. I really value relationships with the community and with the people, not just taking my classes, but with the entire community. And I'm sure I can, in the Q&A, maybe get some questions about different materials and harvesting, so I can get even further into that. Around here. Lost my paper.
Katie?
Sorry. Yes.
We have a quick question that I thought might be good while you're at your wall of materials. Somebody asked,
Yes.
where did you learn how to harvest these materials, and where did you learn how to find them, to go searching for them?
Oh, that's a really good question. Is it okay if I keep the screen on here so that you all can see this stuff?
Yeah, of course.
So I learned A lot of what I've learned has been from books and reading and research and just getting out there and experimenting. I'll read in a book that you can use birch bark for basketry, and I would go out and look for birch bark and find it and learn from trial and error what worked and what doesn't work. Or maybe I'll even just be helping someone cut a tree down for at their house and the bark is really peely, and then I would think, oh, maybe this kind of tree can be used for basketry as well, and experiment with that. So a lot of it has been reading, researching, and experimenting. I've done a little bit of learning from different artists. I spent a few months in North Carolina with Matt Tommy, who I know was, I think, a member of the board of NBO for many years. And I learned a lot about harvesting kudzu, a lot about splitting kudzu, and working with a lot of the barks that are down in North Carolina from him. And then this past, not this summer, but I suppose the summer before, at the NBO's conference, I was able to take a class on white oak basketry, and so I learned from that. I highly recommend seeking out teachers that are really experienced in their field. That's been incredibly enriching in the past few years, is trying to find people to learn from that are true masters of their craft, because that is the way to really continue to develop. And does that answer the question?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
and I
I
just
think
spend a lot of time outside, honestly, looking at things, experimenting with things. A lot of it's plant ID, so I do a lot of plant identification work.
well, that's actually a good segue. We've got a few more questions coming in. I want to tell people if I don't get to their question, we're going to have a more sit-down conversation at the end. But I thought this one was topical. There's a very specific question from somebody who I think must work with this materials. Janine asked, "How do you harvest daylily fronds for your baskets in the late season? Do you do it fresh and dry them, or do you get them fresh? I mean, how do you harvest a daylily fronds?"
That's a great question. It's one of my cardinal rules of natural basketry is you harvest it when it's healthy and in season. So you want to get it before it starts to turn yellow and die back and completely die. But you also want to wait to harvest it until the plant has done most of its growing for the year. I actually think I have some daylilies over here. Because when we're taking from the natural world, it's important to consider yourself second and consider the plant and the environment first. With something like daylilies, that's pretty easy because they typically get cut back as a part of landscaping anyway at the end of the year. But you wouldn't want to cut them in spring when they haven't even flowered yet. So you cut them when they're green in the fall and then dry them and rehydrate them. And that is the general rule for pretty much everything. Harvest in season, let it dry, and then re-soak it in hot water. I think that answers that pretty well. Shall I talk a little bit about my other art?
Yes, please.
I think that would be nice. Okay. So as I mentioned, I have a background in fiber arts, so I'll just pop up to some of my quilts. These, before I started doing baskets, I focused a lot on plant dyes. A lot the brown colors in these quilts are black walnut dye. I studied fiber arts at Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia for, it was a year and a half I was there before I actually left because the campus moved from the suburb to the city, and I couldn't be in the city. So I ended up taking time off and transferring to SUNY New Paltz, which is near where I live now, and getting my BFA in printmaking. But these are part of my thesis from that time. I still managed to work with fibers, even in the printmaking program, by silk screening on fabric. All nature inspired, but more of a fiber than a weaving inspiration. Do a lot of work with wool, work with yarn. It was sculpture, paintings, that kind of thing. My recent work that's not basket related has been watercolor paintings. It's a different experience than doing baskets, and a wonderful complement. I often find myself, when I'm a little more tired, maybe at night, or I get up in the morning, or I imagine there's a snowstorm outside and I don't want to get out all my basket supplies. Sitting down to just work on painting, watercolor painting, is really meditative and nourishing. It's a good complement to the physicality of the basket work, because it's often, me out in the woods wrestling vines out of trees or organizing materials, processing things, and then creating the sculpture work that I had out on the picnic table is also a lot of chisels and sanding and knives and physical work. So painting is a meditative contrast to that. That's what I've been working on recently. I'm just going to bring myself over to the table here. I guess the last thing I wanted to introduce were, when I was collecting baskets for this day, I actually found that I don't really have a ton of baskets around. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I have so many baskets around, you wouldn't believe it. But a lot of my best work ends up being given as a gift, because I don't sell baskets. I almost never sell baskets. Maybe on occasion I'll have something that I sell, but I typically make baskets as, professional development for teaching classes, and because I love to. I just love to make them. And I'll often gift them or trade them with friends or something like that. But I did manage to gather a few. This is, I've been working on some inner bark purse kind of baskets. They're bags, so this will get a leather strap on it. This one is a spruce, oops, on there. This is a spruce and pine root small basket. I really loved making that one. And I work often with pine bark. So I've got a lot of pine bark baskets floating around, which are really fun and easy to make, and just a nice time to get to use that great material. I had a couple of sculptural things. And then last but not least is my tool basket. I always like to introduce my tool basket, especially when I'm teaching classes. Your tools are really your best friends when you're making. So to get to collect all of my favorite tools over the years, have them all nice and neatly organized. I promise it looks crazy, but it is, for me, pretty organized. Everything in there, I know where it is. And that's one of the keys to my teaching and harvesting, is just having good tools and having them right at hand. So I'm going to flip around. Is that good?
Yeah, that looks great.
I probably went through faster than I should have, but it's
No, that
once
was
you get
perfect.
going, it's hard to stop. All right.
No, we've got we've got a few more questions. And again, I want to remind people, if you have questions for Katie, we're going to kind of move into a conversation. So please send in your questions and we'll get to as many as we can and talk about it and talk about some of the things that Katie brought up. One of the questions that
actually, real quick, I'm just going to go turn off one of the lights that's kind of blinding behind me.
Of course.
Maybe it didn't bother you, but as we were talking about earlier, you're always just looking at yourself in Zoom, so I had to get rid of it. All right, go ahead. Sorry, Nick.
Well, we have two questions about materials. Some questions about specific materials, and maybe we can tackle them both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Susan wants to know if you weave with willow, and if you do you grow it yourself? And Sheila asks if there's a specific or a particular species of pine that you use.
Yes, great questions. As for the willow, I do weave with willow. I don't often teach willow classes. I find it particularly difficult to teach a willow class, and I definitely bow to all those out there that are accomplished willow teachers. I'll do it on occasion. But I do have a willow garden. It's at a friend's property, and it's doing wonderfully. They love to grow. They really love to grow, especially in a nice wet area. When I am teaching a willow class, or if I want a bulk of material, I typically order from Howard, who is another NBO member and has a great website and wonderful willow, and he's based in Ohio. And then as for pine, oh, it's the white pine tree, the eastern white pine. And it's a really abundant tree in my area in New England. And I think its range is pretty big. It's a tree that you have to cut down the tree. You have to have a live, healthy tree to be able to harvest the bark. So you either have to choose and cut a tree or find a tree that's already being cut down or has fallen due to storm damage. And it's relatively easy to find that in my area. So it's a great material to work with.
Great. Katie, another question that I know that I'm always interested in when I uh, go to other people's studios or houses is the kind of books that you keep around in your studio. One person asked if there are any particular books that you recommend. I'm not sure if that's necessarily books about basketry itself, but it could be any kind of book. I think, what books do you keep around yourself in the studio, or what books do you think inspired and influenced you as an artist?
Ooh, definitely. I can do that for sure. I'll show you my bookcase. Now, some of them are off of it because they're propping up my computer, but I have a big collection of just various how-to books for basketry. I love any kind of museum catalog. I highly recommend looking into baskets made by Indigenous people around the world. Amazing to appreciate the history and the just mastery of material that happens there. Some of the books that I feel actually kind of guilty. This Baskets from Nature's Bounty book is one that many of you might have. And I feel like my classes might have single-handedly been responsible for its price raising from $20 to like $80 on Amazon because I recommend it often. I also learned a lot when I was starting out from this Natural Baskets book. If anybody knows this person, don't tell them that I have their basket book. I got it used at a library sale or something. Be kind of funny though. So those, just like any book on baskets, really anything. And as far as non-basketry books go, I always recommend that all my students get Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a really, right now, well-known book about many different topics, but she has quite a few sections on basketry related things. And she has an incredible appreciation of the natural world and a valuing of the materials. Her books just weave science and art and Indigenous knowledge all together in the most wonderful way. So I highly recommend her book, Braiding Sweetgrass again.
Excellent. A very specific question that I don't, that I thought we might just do real fast is you mentioned purchasing your willow from Howard. Do you have a website potentially for him? Maybe we can throw that in the chat. If not,
Yeah, I believe it's, he just changed the name of his website. I think we can throw it in the chat. If you Google like basket willow Howard, Ohio, I bet it would come up pretty quickly.
Basket Howard, Ohio, basket
Yeah.
seller, Willow seller, baskets, Ohio.
Yeah,
Howard.
something like that. I can try to pull it up too. I have my phone here, but yeah, because it was the basket farmer, but I think he changed it recently to something like, I can't recall exactly. But before the end of this experience, we can put it in the chat and share it.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
A couple of questions about teaching, which of course I was really interested in, and when you were talking and taking us on your tour too. You know, I think it was just so interesting to hear you talk about, first of all, community and how community is important, both to harvest your materials, but I think teaching is so much about community too. And as you talked about how you gift your baskets away, that was very meaningful. A couple of questions are, one's probably more for me as much as for you. One of the questions is, what kind of classes do you teach? And then the question is, do you plan on teaching at Aeromont again in the future? And the answer to that is yes. Not next year. We talked about it, but in the future, yes. So I'll answer that one. But Katie, what kind of classes do you teach and what do you like to teach?
Let's see. I teach all sorts of things. I guess I'll just go in category. My favorite, like my baby of a class is I teach a 9-month basket series. So we meet once a month from April to December and covered all sorts of different techniques and different materials throughout that time. And because people are dedicated and focused, we're able to harvest, process, and make with the materials. It's very hands-on. So that series, which I call Wild Basketry, is my favorite. I also teach weekend classes and day classes. And I typically focus on techniques and materials. You won't come to my class and learn how to make like a market basket that's exactly this shape and size, and everyone's is pretty similar in the end. You'll come and learn twining with cattails. And the focus is on mastery of the technique of twining, but also the nuances of working with this natural material that has its own personality. I often enjoy having artists in my classes. You don't absolutely have to have any experience to come, but there's always a focus on creativity and on working with the materials and not necessarily like achieving one certain kind of basket or shape of basket.
Excellent. We have a question from Sheila. If you could talk a little bit about sustainable harvesting and how
Mhm.
sustainability has affected your practice.
It's, yeah, incredibly important. I know many of you are probably basket makers and at the very least appreciators of nature. And it's about the land and it's about the environment before it is about us. And if you go into it with that mindset of you're not, like, I don't go into the woods often expecting to take something. I might have my eye out for a tree, or I might know that I need this certain thing, but I'm always going to put the plant and the natural world first. If I only have one elm tree on the whole property, I would never cut that tree, and no one should. You really do have to think of the plants first. When it comes to invasive plants, I'm a little less careful about it. A lot of the materials I'll use will be bittersweet vine, or grapevine is a native plant, but it tends to do just fine. Grapevine is going to be okay. So you can harvest with a little bit more abandon when it comes to those. A plant like cattail, which grows in marshes or wet areas, I'll always be careful to look at the patch and see, is this patch healthy? Can it handle being harvested from? Is it being encroached upon at the edges by an invasive plant? And if so, perhaps I'm going into the middle of the patch to harvest and taking only a few plants from here and there and not clear cutting an area. It's always asking, you know, just using your senses and looking at the plant. Is it the only one around? Is it healthy? Is it the first one? You don't want to harvest the very first one you come upon, because what if there are no more after that? Now, a lot of the plants that I end up harvesting or using are in relationship with like a landscaping company, or I know quite a few arborists and tree workers who will be cutting down a tree anyway for a client. Whether or not I support the cutting of that tree is, it may not, I may not support the cutting of the tree, but if it is coming down anyway, then I'll be there to harvest the bark and get to share it and appreciate it. And the same with like a lot of the grasses and daylily leaves that were mentioned before, and iris. They're probably going to be cut at the end of the season anyway. So I can come in and harvest those and feel pretty comfortable about it.
You know, in relation to talking about that, there were two questions. Again, these are sort of specific material questions, but I thought they were really interesting and fascinating because one of them is about harvesting roots and how do you harvest roots? And then another one was just kind of what you were just talking about, which is getting bark from tree. Judith asked
Mhm.
is, Judith is somebody who's interested in bark baskets, but doesn't know where to buy it or have resources to get it. And then somebody else, in response to you talking about it, asked, well, how do you harvest bark from a down tree from an arborist? So maybe you can talk a little bit first about the roots, which I thought was an interesting question, but then
Mhm.
what are the opportunities for us to get bark either locally or maybe from another resource and how you've come across that?
Definitely. So for the roots, my favorite root to use is spruce root, but you can use the roots of many different pines and even different, probably deciduous trees as well, but I have not experimented with that. And it's a matter of looking for the right spot. And actually, in Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass, she has a wonderful chapter on root harvest. So I recommend reading that in the book for like a more embodied like reading experience of it. But you're looking for a place where there's a lot of trees, where the soil is right. You know, you wouldn't want sandy, rocky soil, difficult to dig roots out of. Maybe a lot of like forest duff that you can dig down a little bit and find a root and then gently follow it along its course, cut it, and place all the soil back down over top of where you've taken the root. And a tree can handle some of its roots being removed. You don't have to worry about killing a big healthy spruce tree by harvesting some of it. You certainly wouldn't want to harvest a lot or keep coming back to the same spot year after year. And honestly, I've been maybe at somebody's house where there's 6 or 7 spruce trees growing all near each other. It's a suburban lawn. I'm like, I'll give it a try. Dig down and you'll find something. You'll find something to at least begin with. There's kind of the ideal basket tree, and then there's what you end up with. And you can absolutely make out of material that's not perfect, which actually leads really nicely into the question about the tree. So when people come to my classes, I often preface it by saying, okay, here's a grass basket. It's a coiled grass basket. This is a really wonderful backyard project. You can easily go out and cut the materials, go home and make a coiled basket. Now, like I've got some bark here, using elm bark to weave with, you got to go and cut down a tree. Like, it's a big investment to have the skills and the ability to do that. And once the tree is cut, not only does it have to be cut, it also needs to be the right season. It's got to be when the sap is flowing in the spring, in the summer. You have to have a tree that's generally straight. You want to try to get nice long sections of material. Once the tree's on the ground, you use a draw knife to take the outer bark off. And then once the outer bark is carefully removed, you can peel off these long sections of inner bark, which, as you can see, is not really that thick. You don't get much material out of a tree compared to using black ash or white oak, where you're using the wood itself and there's just a lot more material per tree. So I almost always, with an elm, which is definitely a tree that's endangered because of Dutch elm disease, decimating a lot of the elm population. Luckily, I'm in an area where it's relatively abundant and healthy, and people end up cutting them down in their yards fairly frequently. So I'll harvest the bark from those trees. As far as resources to purchase it, I've never bought it before. There are chair caning websites that you can buy, I believe, tulip poplar and perhaps elm and some other barks. I can't promise they would be usable for baskets. They might be on the thicker side, but it would be worth a try. And you can also just keep an eye out. Tell everybody that you meet that you're a basket maker and you're looking for when trees fall in someone's yard after a storm, and eventually someone's going to give you a call and be like, oh, this tree fell, and oh, it's the species you want. Or perhaps a branch is being pruned off of an elm tree or a basswood tree or a black walnut tree, or what else would I use? A white pine. White pine is one that it often falls during storms, or you'll have a nice ice storm and the branches will come raining down and you'll have maybe not the perfect material. It might be a branch that's a little wiggly and weird. Don't worry. Go out and just try it. See if it peels off. You might end up with great material. And I wish I only got out my most nice baskets. I should have brought some of my first baskets, which are a branch from a tree, and it's wonky and it's weird, but the experience will never leave me.
Katie, I really loved seeing your watercolors, and I think that for me, it makes sense to see those watercolors in relationship to your basket. But one of the things that you talked about, which I thought was just really illuminating, was that you kind of lean towards watercolor on certain times of day or certain weather, or maybe even it almost sounded like maybe even like how you feel on a certain day, like emotional states sort of lend
Yeah.
itself. So thinking about not making art as a finished product, but making art as a process, what do some of
Mm,
these processes give you back? Like, what does it feel like? What do you get from doing watercolor that's different than what do you get from making baskets? And um,
mm.
how do you balance those two types of art making at the same time, and how often do you spend going from one to the other?
Oh, that's a wonderful way to look at it, is the process of it. I think from the paintings, they're very sedentary. I'm really just sitting there painting these extremely detailed, slow, almost painfully slow pieces of art, and it's nourishing, and just the repetitiveness. I don't really have to think about anything. There is problem solving as I'm deciding what to do, but it's calming. It's calming. I often do that in like the dead of winter or the heat of summer when I don't really want to be outside because it's so hot. And with the basket work, it's more engaging. It's more full body and physical. I feel like I stretch my mind a lot as I'm experimenting with how things fit together, or how the weave works, or like these some random weave baskets. This was a series where I was weaving words into the baskets, and it's the technical problem solving is really really interesting to me. I guess the baskets, it just brings me joy to work with plants as well. And so the whole varied process of harvesting and processing, and just your hands are on the materials so intimately, and you're really learning how they work. It's I don't know if that answers the whole question, but it's nice to think about.
Oh, that was great. We're pretty much at our final time here. We're going to try to wrap things up. We've got one final question from Peggy, who wants to know a little bit more about when we were talking about using pine and roots. Well, maybe a
Mhm.
bit more specifically, how you use them in your basket, or what part did they play in your
Mm.
basket making?
Yeah, let me first of all, Bo has come to visit, and he says hello to everybody. So the pine roots or the bark or both?
Both. Well, I think they said the pine question mark and then roots, so maybe both. Yeah.
Okay. The pine bark from the white pine is like a hard, when you peel it off the tree, it's soft, kind of like leather, and then you're able to fold it and sew it into shapes and let it dry. It's typically, when you peel it off the tree, going to be in square or rectangle pieces, so it really lends itself to folding. It's not usually super long sections the way that the branches grow. So I'm not usually weaving with white pine bark. And then for the roots of either the pine or the spruce, I use them for twining mostly, to make twined things. And then also for sewing. It's a wonderful sewing material to use a root to sew. This particular basket is not sewn with pine, but it could easily have been. And I recommend Vladimir Yadish, I believe is his name, has a wonderful book on birch basketry, and he talks a lot about spruce roots and harvesting them and processing them in that book. And it's over on the shelf right there. Let me see if I can. No, I don't see it over there. I actually might have, maybe I lent it to someone, but I recommend his book for learning more about working with roots.
Great. Well, Katie, I think we're just about out of time, but I wanted to thank you again for this wonderful tour and sort of insight into your studio and process. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that went really fast. I'm like
Great.
on a roll, ready to keep going. But yeah, we have a Zoom limit for sure that all of us are definitely reaching on, I bet.
And then Pam, I guess I'll hand it over to you.
Right, but Nick, I
There's so
thought
many
there was
questions.
one more question that you
Oh,
might want to ask.
sure. Yeah. Okay, so here it is. It's more about the bark that we were just talking about. And when you peel bark off, Katie, do you need a draw knife or do you just reach in and peel?
It depends. If the tree is older and the outer bark has become rough and like crustier, then you are going to need a draw knife to take the outer bark off before you can get the inner bark to peel. If the tree is younger or it's a branch and the outer bark is still smooth, then you can peel them off together. And I will always use good thing I have my tool basket right here, a utility knife to cut the lines down the trunk to make a score, basically, to peel off. And when you're talking about if you use a draw knife or not, that's almost always with a deciduous tree like the elm or the basswood or black walnut. When it comes to the white pine, I'm always looking for bark that's smooth enough that I don't need to separate the outer from the inner bark to peel it off. You want a tree that's young and the bark is smooth so it can just come off all as one. And I know it's a lot. This talk is probably a lot of like material overwhelm. There's probably a lot of thoughts and questions like, oh, what is that plant? How does that process really work? And definitely email me with questions. I actually have a blog that I don't have a lot of posts on there, but there's a couple of plants like cattail, and I think I did some root stuff on there that probably answer some of those questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Katie. And thank you to everybody too. Let me also just make a note to say thank you to everybody for not only attending, but also so many great questions and so engaged into the conversation. Thank you all for asking questions. And now, Pam, I think over to you.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, we're so grateful from NBO, speaking on behalf of the organization, that Katie, you were willing to take us on an adventure and a visual tour around your outdoor space and your indoor space and show us your creativity. And it's just been wonderful. And Nick, thank you for your willingness to host this and be the interviewer and just share all this fun with us. I want to thank everybody who came. We appreciate your joining us for this studio tour. Once again, I'm just going to mention that we'll be sending out an e-blast for the next NBO Presents. It will be on November 4th, and it will happen through the Sacqua Textile Talks. And if anybody wants to email any of us, Nick, Katie, or me, you can do that. We love to hear your feedback. It's really appreciated. I've put the donation link back in the chat someplace if you're looking for it, in case you want to help support this program, or you can just go to nationalbasketry.org and click on the donate button. It's right on the homepage. And thanks to everybody for coming. And I think we are done. Maybe Nick and Katie will just stay on. And it's been wonderful. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much. Bye, everybody.